This is the story of how the most prosperous nation in Europe tore apart and ate its own leader, not because he failed them but because he succeeded in ways they didn't understand. The date is August 20, 1672. The Hague, capital of the Dutch Republic, a mob surrounds the Zevengenpoort prison. Inside, two brothers await their fate. Johan de Witt, the Grand Pensionary, effectively the Prime Minister of the Dutch Republic for 20 years, and his brother Cornelis, accused of plotting to assassinate the Prince of Orange. The mob breaks through, they drag both brothers into the street. What happens next is so brutal that eyewitness accounts were suppressed for decades. The brothers are shot, stabbed, stripped naked, and hanged upside down from a public scaffold. Then the mob begins cutting. They remove organs, they take strips of flesh. Some eat the pieces raw, others sell them as souvenirs. Body parts are auctioned in the street. This is not a medieval barbarity. This is 1672. The Dutch Golden Age, the most economically advanced, culturally sophisticated, religiously tolerant society in Europe. The nation that invented modern capitalism, stock markets, and international banking. And they are eating their prime minister. By the end of this video, you will understand why economic success creates political vulnerability, how rational governance loses to populist rage during crisis, and why the man who saved Holland economically was destroyed politically, then literally consumed by the people he protected. The Dutch Republic in 1672 is the richest nation in Europe. Amsterdam is the financial capital of the world. Dutch ships dominate global trade. The Dutch East India Company is the most valuable corporation in history. Dutch banks finance kings and wars across the continent. Dutch merchants control the spice trade, the slave trade, the timber trade, the grain trade. This wealth is recent and revolutionary. 50 years earlier, the Dutch Republic didn't exist. It was the Spanish Netherlands, a collection of provinces owned by the Spanish Habsburg Empire. But in 1568, the Dutch revolted. 80 years of war followed. In 1648, Spain finally recognized Dutch independence. The Republic was born. And in those 50 years after independence, the Dutch became spectacularly rich, richer per capita than any nation in history up to that point. Amsterdam grew from a mid-sized port to a global metropolis. Dutch art, science, and culture flourished. The Dutch middle class lived better than European nobility. But this wealth created a political problem. The Dutch Republic is not a kingdom. It is a republic, a federation of 7 provinces, each jealous of its autonomy. There is no king. Instead, power is divided between 2 factions that hate each other. The first faction is the stadholders, the House of Orange-Nassau, military commanders from a noble family. They want a strong central government, a powerful military, and themselves in charge. They represent the old aristocratic order, hereditary power, military glory, traditional hierarchy. The second faction is the regent, the merchant oligarchs who actually run the republic. Rich families who control town councils and provincial governments. They want weak central government, low military spending, and maximum autonomy for provinces and cities. They represent the new capitalist order, elected power, commercial interest, economic rationality. For 20 years, the regent have been winning, and their leader is Johan de Witt. De Witt becomes Grand Pensionary of Holland in 1653 at age 28. He is a political genius, mathematician, lawyer, administrator. He understands that Dutch wealth comes from trade, not territory, from financial markets, not military conquest. His entire foreign policy is designed to protect commerce and minimize war. This makes perfect economic sense. The Dutch Republic is tiny, barely 2 million people. It cannot compete with France 20 million or England 5 million in military power, but it can dominate them economically. Dutch ships are cheaper and faster. Dutch banks offer better credit. Dutch markets are more liquid. The Republic makes more money financing wars than fighting them. De Witt's strategy works brilliantly. For 20 years, the Dutch Republic prospers under his leadership. He negotiates peace with England. He forms alliances against France. He keeps military spending low and taxes lower. He protects Dutch trade routes and financial interests without expensive wars. The economy booms. Amsterdam's stock exchange processes trades worth millions of guilders daily. Dutch East India Company dividends make merchants fantastically wealthy. Dutch banks become the preferred lenders to European monarchs. The Republic becomes the financial center of the world. But military spending stays low. The Dutch army shrinks. Fortifications are neglected. The stadholder position held by the House of Orange is left vacant in most provinces. De Witt deliberately weakens the military to prevent the Orange faction from gaining power. This is economically rational but politically dangerous. Economic success makes the merchant class richer, but it leaves the common people anxious. They see wealth concentrating at the top. They see traditional military glory abandoned. They see their country defended by accountants instead of generals. And they resent Johan de Witt for it. In 1672, everything collapses. The year becomes known as the Rampjaar, the disaster year. In a coordinated attack, France, England, and 2 German states invade the Dutch Republic simultaneously. It is the greatest military crisis in Dutch history. The French army, the most powerful in Europe, invades from the south with 120,000 soldiers. English warships attack Dutch merchant fleets at sea. German forces strike from the east. The Republic is surrounded and outnumbered 5-1. Dutch defenses collapse within weeks. French forces advance so quickly that the Republic's army barely has time to retreat. Within 2 months, the French occupy 3 of 7 Dutch provinces. The Republic is hours away from complete conquest. De Witt responds with the only weapon he has left: water. The Dutch open the dikes and flood their own country. They deliberately inundate thousands of acres of their most valuable farmland, creating a water barrier the French army cannot cross. It is an act of calculated self-destruction to prevent total annihilation. The water line stops the French advance. The military situation stabilizes. The Republic survives. De Witt has saved Holland, but at catastrophic cost. Farmland is destroyed. Refugees flood into the cities. The economy tanks. Trade collapses. Tax revenue disappears. And the people are terrified and furious. The crisis creates political opportunity. The Orange faction sees their chance. For 20 years, they have been sidelined by De Witt's mercantile policies. Now, with the nation at war, they can reclaim power by claiming they would have prevented the disaster with stronger military preparation. The propaganda campaign is immediate and vicious. Orange supporters flood pamphlets across the Republic. The message is simple: De Witt weakened the military, De Witt left us defenseless, De Witt caused the Rampjaar, De Witt betrayed us. None of this is true. The invasion succeeded because France, England, and Germany coordinated a surprise attack. No amount of military spending would have stopped 120,000 French troops. De Witt's diplomacy had prevented this alliance from forming for 20 years. His failure was that he couldn't prevent it forever. But truth doesn't matter during crisis. People are scared, they want someone to blame, and De Witt is the obvious target. The economic dimension makes it worse. For 20 years, De Witt's policies enriched merchants while ordinary people saw limited benefit. The wealth gap widened. Amsterdam bankers made fortunes while workers' wages stagnated. The Republic got richer, but the gains went disproportionately to the top. This was structural, not De Witt's fault. The Dutch economy was built on high-skilled trade and finance, industries that enrich educated merchants, not manual laborers. But perception is what matters. When crisis hits, people remember that they stayed poor while the elite got rich under De Witt's leadership. The mob is primed to explode. They need a target for their economic anxiety, their military humiliation, their existential fear. De Witt becomes that target. In June 1672, popular riots demand the restoration of the stadtholder position. The Orange faction orchestrates the pressure. On July 4, William III of Orange is appointed stadtholder and captain general. At age 21, he becomes military commander and de facto ruler. William is De Witt's political enemy. He represents everything De Witt opposed: hereditary power, military priorities, centralized authority. But William is also politically savvy. He knows that directly attacking De Witt would be risky. De Witt still has supporters among the regent class. So William lets the mob do his work. On August 4, Cornelis de Witt, Johan's brother, is arrested on fabricated charges of plotting to assassinate William of Orange. The evidence is extracted under torture from a barber who later recants. It is obviously a frame-up, but it doesn't matter. Cornelis is imprisoned in The Hague. On August 20, Johan de Witt visits his brother in prison. It is a trap. Orange partisans spread rumors that De Witt is orchestrating a coup. A mob assembles outside the prison. The civic guard, normally responsible for keeping order, stands aside. some guards actively join the mob. The political context is clear. William and the Orange faction have given the mob implicit permission. The civic guards' refusal to act is not incompetence, it is policy. The authorities want De Witt dead but cannot execute him legally, so they unleash the crowd. The mob storms the prison. They drag both brothers into the Groen Zeuge, a public square. Militia soldiers fire their muskets into the brothers at point-blank range. The crowd beats them with clubs and pikes. They strip the bodies naked and hang them upside down from a scaffold. Then the mutilation begins. Eyewitness accounts describe the mob cutting open the bodies and removing internal organs. Heart, liver, intestines. Some pieces are eaten on the spot, others are sold in the street. Body parts are auctioned. Fingers and toes become trophies. Strips of flesh are cut off and taken as souvenirs. One account describes a man roasting De Witt's testicles over a fire and eating them. Another describes someone cutting off De Witt's face and wearing it as a mask. The bodies are so mutilated that identification is difficult. The cannibalism is not frenzied chaos, it is methodical, purposeful desecration. This is not random violence, this is ritual murder. The mob is not just killing De Witt, they are consuming him, destroying him utterly, erasing his physical existence as revenge for his political existence. The message is clear: you betrayed us, so we will unmake you completely, not just kill you, devour you. The psychological dimension is critical. The cannibalism is symbolic as much as physical. De Witt represented rational, calculated economic governance. The mob's response is visceral, emotional, physical. They are rejecting everything De Witt stood for by literally consuming his body. It is also a display of power. Eating someone is the ultimate assertion of dominance. The mob is saying, you thought you were superior with your mathematics and diplomacy, but we are stronger. We can reduce you to meat. Economically, the cannibalism reflects class rage. For 20 years, the merchant elite prospered under De Witt while ordinary people stagnated. The mob is literally consuming the symbol of that elite. They are taking back physically, violently, what they believe was taken from them economically. The political consequences are immediate. William of Orange consolidates power unopposed. The regent faction is shattered. The Orange faction dominates Dutch politics for the next century. The Republic becomes more militarized, more centralized, less commercially focused. Ironically, this weakens the Dutch economy long-term. Military spending increases, taxes rise, the merchant class loses influence, trade becomes subordinate to military priorities. The Dutch Golden Age begins its slow decline. Within 50 years, England will surpass Holland as the financial center of Europe. De Witt was right on the economics. His policies maximized Dutch prosperity given the Republic's small size and geographic vulnerability. The Rampjaar was not caused by insufficient military spending, it was caused by an unprecedented coalition of enemies that no amount of spending could have deterred. But De Witt was wrong on the politics. He underestimated how much people need symbolic reassurance during uncertainty. He assumed rational economic arguments would prevail. He didn't understand that when people are scared, they want warriors, not accountants. They want someone who promises strength, even if that strength is economically irrational. The cannibalism of Johan de Witt reveals something fundamental about the relationship between economic success and political stability. Economic rationality does not guarantee political survival. Sometimes the economically optimal policy is politically suicidal. De Witt's policies made the Republic richer, but they made him vulnerable. He concentrated wealth at the top. He neglected military symbolism. He governed rationally in a world that values emotional reassurance. When crisis hit, he had no political support among ordinary people, even though his policies had protected their prosperity for 20 years. The pattern repeats throughout history. Economically competent leaders are often politically destroyed. Rational policies that maximize long-term prosperity lose to populist promises that feel good emotionally. The public prefers leaders who validate their anxieties over leaders who actually solve their problems. Modern parallels are obvious. Political leaders across democracies face the same trade-off De Witt faced: implement economically rational policies that concentrate benefits among educated elites, or implement populist policies that redistribute but harm overall growth. De Witt chose economic rationality. He saved the Republic from Spanish reconquest through diplomacy. He made Holland the richest nation in Europe through trade. He protected Dutch prosperity for 20 years through financial sophistication. And when crisis came, the mob ate him. The lesson is not that economic rationality is wrong. The lesson is that economic success alone does not create political legitimacy. People need to feel protected, not just be protected. They need symbols of strength, not just actual strength. They need emotional reassurance, not just rational governance. De Witt provided rational governance. He didn't provide emotional reassurance. That failure killed him and led to his consumption. The cannibalism also reveals how economic anxiety transforms into physical violence. The mob didn't just want De Witt dead, they wanted him destroyed, consumed, erased. This intensity reflects the depth of their economic resentment. For 20 years, they watched merchants get rich while they stagnated. They saw wealth concentrate in Amsterdam while they struggled. They paid taxes that financed trade instead of defense. And when invasion came, they felt vindicated. See, De Witt's system didn't protect us after all. The cannibalism is the physical expression of economic rage. They are reclaiming, through violence, what they believe was taken from them through economic policy. This is the danger of inequality during crisis. When prosperity is broadly shared, people tolerate setbacks. When prosperity concentrates at the top, crisis becomes revolution. De Witt's economic success made him a target because the benefits were visible to everyone but experienced by few. The mob didn't eat William of Orange, they didn't eat the Amsterdam bankers, they ate the man who symbolized the system they resented. De Witt wasn't the richest man in Holland, but he was the architect of the system that made others rich while they stayed poor. Modern economies face the same risk. When growth benefits primarily educated urban elites while rural and working-class populations stagnate, political stability becomes fragile. Economic rationality, free trade, immigration, technological change benefits the economy overall but harms specific groups. Those groups become politically volatile. The solution De Witt never found was how to govern rationally while maintaining mass political support. How to implement policies that maximize prosperity while ensuring people feel the benefits. How to be both economically competent and politically popular. No one has solved this. Every democratic leader faces the same trade-off: rational economics or populist politics, competence or charisma, actual solutions or emotional validation. De Witt chose competence. He governed brilliantly for 20 years. He made the Dutch Republic the most prosperous nation in Europe. He saved them from Spanish reconquest, English aggression, and French invasion until the one time he couldn't. And when he failed once after succeeding for 20 years, they tore him apart and ate him. The Dutch Republic survived the Rampjaar. The French were pushed back. English attacks were repelled. The Republic remained independent. Within 5 years, the military crisis was over. The waterline strategy, De Witt's final act, worked. Holland survived exactly because of the decisions De Witt made. But De Witt didn't survive to see it. He died believing he had failed. The mob that killed him believed they were punishing a traitor. History records that they murdered the man who saved them. The cannibalism of Johan de Witt was not madness. It was not random violence. It was the logical conclusion of economic anxiety, political scapegoating, and populist rage. It was what happens when rational governance meets irrational fear, when economic competence confronts political vulnerability, when the man who saves you is blamed for the crisis he prevented from being worse. The mob thought they were eating a traitor, they were eating their savior, and they didn't realize it until it was too late. The Dutch Republic learned nothing from eating Johan de Witt. Within a generation, they forgot the lesson. The same economic anxieties, the same political scapegoating, the same cycle repeated, just with different victims. Every society believes it is different. Every generation thinks its violence is justified. The Dutch in 1672 believed they were punishing a traitor. They convinced themselves that De Witt deserved what happened, that the cannibalism was righteous fury, not mob savagery. They were wrong, and history proved them wrong within years. The French invasion was repelled using De Witt's strategies. The Republic survived because of his decisions. The water line worked. The diplomatic foundations he built held. Everything he was murdered for turned out to be correct. But by then, he was already consumed, literally and politically. His body parts were scattered across the Hague as trophies. His legacy was erased by Orange propaganda. For a century, mentioning de Witt positively was dangerous. The mob had won. Until they lost, the Dutch Republic never regained its golden age dominance. Military spending drained resources from commerce. The merchant class lost influence to military aristocracy. Trade suffered. Within 50 years, England surpassed Holland as Europe's financial center. The very policies de Witt warned against, militarization over commerce, caused the decline the mob feared he was causing. They ate the man who could have saved them from decline, and then they declined anyway. This is the final lesson: political violence doesn't solve problems, it just creates new ones. The mob thought killing de Witt would restore Dutch glory. Instead, it accelerated Dutch decline. They destroyed their own best chance at adaptation and survival. And that is the ultimate horror of August 20, 1672, not just that they ate their leader, but that they ate him for nothing. The violence was pointless. The cannibalism was meaningless. They gained nothing and lost everything. Johan de Witt died believing he had failed. The mob that killed him believed they had saved Holland. History shows both were wrong. De Witt succeeded, his policies worked. The mob failed, their violence accomplished nothing. They didn't just eat their prime minister, they ate their future, and they didn't realize it until they were starving.